My stepmother used to count the rice grains in our pantry, so I couldn't steal any and eat behind her back. When I begged her to let me have food, she twisted my arm and whispered, "You're lucky your daddy still keeps you." I didn't say a word, I just knew what I was about to do. This morning, she was staring at her dinner plate like it might bite her. My stepmother Linda only wanted to starve one child, not her precious Eleanor with her dance recitals and private school uniforms, just me, the reminder of Dad's first marriage who took up too much space and cost too much money. It started when I was 9. When I asked why she kept forgetting to pack my school lunches, she called me a greedy pig. And 9-year-old me was kind, but I wasn't a pushover. So I ran straight to my dad's home office. "She's being mean," I sobbed. "She won't let me eat." "What do you mean she won't let you eat? Could you come here for a second, honey?" Linda barged in and interrupted, her voice as sweet as syrup. She dragged me to my room and closed the door. "Remember how sad your daddy was when your mommy went to heaven?" she asked, looking at her pretty nails. "If you tell on me again, I can make him worse. Much worse." Before I could say anything, there was a knock at the door. It was my dad. "Is everything okay in there?" I looked at her. She looked at me. "Yep," I exclaimed, in the happiest tone I could muster. From there, I practically became Linda's little puppet. My dad trusted her to raise me and started working 70 hours a week at the firm. All of Dad's lunch money went to Eleanor's extras while I sat in the cafeteria pretending I'd already eaten, making up stories about big breakfasts that never existed. But the worst part was dinner. The smell of roasted chicken would make me dizzy. My mouth would water so much I'd have to keep swallowing, trying not to stare as Eleanor asked for seconds. "Look at this blubber," she'd whisper, twisting my skin until bruises bloomed purple and green. Disgusting. I never even bothered trying to steal food from the fridge, because every night she'd count and record everything that was there, right down to the grain of rice. She said it was for her diabetes management, but I knew better. And by 7th grade, my body had given up trying to grow. No curves, no period, nothing. Just sharp bones and baggy clothes. Dad came home early one night and saw me in a tank top. "Wow," he said, his face beaming with pride. "Whatever diet you've got her on is really working. She looks so healthy." I watched Linda's smile spread slow and satisfied. "It's all about portion control," she said. My face flushed with embarrassment. Immediately, I was hit with an overwhelming urge to cut off every part of myself that had any amount of fat. From there, I started eating even less than Linda gave me, and my days became filled with dizzy spells and fainting in the bathrooms. Fast forward to when I was 22 and in my 3rd year of college. I was sitting in my nutrition class, severely underweight and barely able to stay awake. My professor got onto the topic of eating disorders, specifically how it starts. "Food restriction in children is one of the most insidious forms of abuse," she said. "The perpetrator maintains complete control while leaving no visible marks." As I sat in the lecture hall, a different kind of emptiness filled my stomach, the kind that comes with understanding. 13 years of starving, and what had I discovered? Only that some people grow stronger by making you smaller. That's when I realized I'd been playing victim for 13 years. Time to play doctor. After college, I became a certified nutritionist, specializing in diabetes, got my certifications, built my reputation. My dad thought I was an academic genius, but really, I was an evil mastermind. As Linda got older, her diabetes got worse, and Dad was traveling more for work. She needed someone trustworthy to be her sole caregiver, ideally someone in the family. Lucky for her, she had a daughter who knew meal plans inside and out. I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home, medical bags and carefully prepared meal plans stacked in the back seat. Linda opened the front door before I could knock, her smile stretched wide but never reaching her eyes. "Oh, sweetheart, you're here." She wrapped me in a hug that felt like being squeezed by a python. I noticed how her fingers pressed into my back, probably checking if I'd gained weight. Dad emerged from the garage, dragging his suitcase toward his car. His face lit up when he saw me. Perfect timing. I was worried about leaving Linda alone with her condition getting worse. I shifted my medical bag to my other hand and gave him my most reassuring smile. "I'll take excellent care of her." Linda's hand trembled slightly on her coffee cup. Her eyes flicked toward the kitchen, specifically to the pantry door. I'd already noticed the new lock installed there during my last visit. Dad kissed Linda's cheek, then mine. 2 weeks in Singapore. Big merger. "You sure you can handle this?" "Dad, I'm literally trained for this. Go close your deal." After his car disappeared down the street, I turned to Linda. The fake warmth evaporated from her face like morning dew. "Let's get started with your assessment." I wheeled my bags inside, noting how she stepped back to let me pass. "I need to review all your current medications and food supplies." Linda followed me to the kitchen. "I've been managing fine on my own." "That's not what your A1C levels suggest." I opened her medication cabinet, photographing each bottle. "These dosages are all over the place." "When did Dr. Morrison last adjust your insulin?" "Last month." I made a note on my tablet. "These dangerous inconsistencies could cull you." I turned to face her. Good thing Dad gave me medical power of attorney before he left. The coffee cup slipped from her hand, shattering on the tile floor. Brown liquid spread across the white squares. "Medical power of attorney?" Her voice came out strangled. "Didn't he tell you? He signed it last week. Said he couldn't focus on work worrying about your health." I stepped over the broken ceramic. "I'll clean that up after I inventory your food." My phone buzzed. Eleanor's name flashed on the screen. "Hey, is Mom okay? She seemed really off at lunch yesterday. Kept talking about portion sizes." I typed back quickly. "Just arrived. Scheduling her comprehensive health assessment this afternoon. I'll keep you updated." Linda bent to pick up the ceramic shards. "I don't need any assessment. I feel fine." That's what all non-compliant patients say. I used the same tone she'd used when I was 9. "This afternoon, we're doing new A1C testing, full metabolic panel, and discussing your diet. Doctor's orders. I have book club this afternoon. I'll reschedule it." I opened the refrigerator, cataloging its contents. "Your health comes first. Besides, we need to talk about portion control." She flinched at the phrase. Good. The clinic's waiting room smelled like disinfectant and fear. Linda sat rigid beside me while I filled out her intake forms. "Concerning weight gain over the past 6 months," I told Dr. Patterson when he called us back, "her current diet clearly isn't working." Linda opened her mouth to protest, but I continued. "I've prepared a 1,200-calorie meal plan based on the latest diabetic research. Here are my calculations." Dr. Patterson reviewed my documents while Linda sat silent in the corner chair, her hands twisted in her lap. "This seems quite restrictive," he said. "Her A1C is 8.2. We need aggressive intervention." I pulled up more charts on my tablet. As her caregiver and a certified nutritionist, I'll personally ensure compliance. He glanced at Linda's chart, then at her. The numbers I'd highlighted told a story of poor control and weight gain. Never mind that her actual weight was ideal for her height and age. "Well, with your credentials and family involvement," he signed the diet order. "Let's try this for 3 months." Back home, I immediately began removing items from the kitchen. Crackers, cookies, even her whole grain fine bread went into boxes. Those are my foods, Linda protested weakly. We're your foods. This is all poison for diabetics. I sealed another box. From now on, you eat what I prepare, for your health. That evening, I found her trying to call Dad. I gently took the phone. He's in meetings until midnight Singapore time. You know how these mergers are. I set the phone on the counter, just out of her reach. Besides, I'm sending him daily updates. He's thrilled we're finally addressing your condition properly. While she slept, I searched her bedroom. Under the mattress, behind the dresser, inside shoeboxes. Finally, in the back of her closet, I found it. A plastic bag filled with candy bars and chips. The same spot where I used to hide the crackers I'd steal from Eleanor's lunchbox. I photographed everything, making sure the timestamp was visible. The next morning, I presented the evidence. Hiding food is a sign of food addiction. I used her exact words from when she'd found my hidden crackers at age 10. This is why you need supervision. Eleanor arrived that evening for dinner. I served grilled chicken with vegetables for everyone, but Linda's plate was different. Measured portions on a smaller plate. No sauce, no salt. Mom, you're not eating much, Eleanor observed. Linda pushed the dried chicken around her plate. I'm not very hungry. She ate a large lunch. I lied smoothly. And look what I found yesterday. I showed Eleanor the photos of the hidden snacks. Eleanor's expression shifted to concern mixed with disappointment. The same look Dad used to give me when Linda reported my food obsession. Mom, you have to take this seriously. You could lose your feet, or worse. After Eleanor left, I installed a child lock on Linda's phone, blocking all food delivery apps. Medical necessity, I explained, to prevent cheating. Margaret called the next day, worried that Linda had missed their weekly lunch. She's on a strict new treatment plan, I explained. Doctor's orders, no restaurant food for now. But we've been having lunch every Tuesday for 15 years. Her health has to come first. I'm sure you understand. That evening, I set up a video call with Dad. Linda sat beside me, her face carefully neutral. Look at these progress reports. I showed him the charts I'd created, identical in format to the ones Linda used to keep of my weight. She's already showing improvement. That's wonderful. Linda, you're so lucky to have her taking care of you. Linda's smile looked painted on. So lucky. After the call, I caught her trying to sneak into the kitchen. The confrontation that followed felt like destiny fulfilling itself. This is about compliance, Linda. You have to trust the process. I guided her back to her room. Tomorrow, we're implementing new security measures, for your own good. The next morning, I installed locks on the pantry, the same kind she'd used when I was 12. As I turned the key, I saw recognition dawn in her eyes. You can't do this, she whispered. I'm your caregiver. I can do whatever's medically necessary. I pocketed the key. And this is necessary. At her book club meeting, I arrived with a small container. Linda's special meal, I announced to the group. She's on a strict diabetic diet now. Please don't offer her any snacks. We need everyone's support. The women nodded sympathetically. They promised to help by not tempting her with their usual spread of cookies and sandwiches. Linda's sister Catherine called offering to help with care. That's so kind, I said. Here's what Linda needs. Strict meal times, no deviation from the plan, and absolutely no extra food. Even a small cheat could spike her blood sugar dangerously. I gave Catherine detailed instructions that would effectively isolate Linda further. No surprise visits during meal prep, no bringing groceries, no taking her out without checking with me first. Eleanor began noticing her mother's fatigue. She seems so tired lately. It's normal during dietary transition, I explained. Her body is adjusting to proper nutrition for the first time in years. I started scheduling Linda's meals during Dad's daily calls, ensuring her blood sugar was at its lowest when they spoke. She couldn't complain coherently when her mind was foggy from hunger. At her next doctor's appointment, Linda tried to speak directly to Dr. Patterson. I think the diet is too. She's been showing signs of confusion from blood sugar fluctuations, I interrupted. Yesterday, she insisted she hadn't eaten lunch when I'd fed her 2 hours earlier. The doctor made a note about possible cognitive effects from unstable glucose levels. That night, I reduced her portions again. You've hit a plateau. We need to break through it. Linda stared at her plate. 3 ounces of fish, half a cup of green beans, no starch. This isn't enough food, she said quietly. That's what all food addicts say. I sat across from her with my own full plate. Trust the process. As I watched her count every green bean, spacing them out to make the meal last longer, I felt 13 years of hunger transform into something else. Something that tasted like justice but burned like acid in my throat. The pantry key weighed heavy in my pocket. Tomorrow, I'd implement the next phase. But tonight, I watched my stepmother go to bed hungry for the 25th night in a row, just like she taught me. I noticed Linda's hair starting to thin during her morning weigh-in. Strands clung to my fingers as I checked her scalp, documenting the changes with clinical precision. She winced when I pulled too hard, but I maintained my professional demeanor. Hair loss can indicate nutritional deficiencies, I noted aloud, photographing the evidence. Though in your case, it's likely from your pre-existing condition. The irony wasn't lost on me. Linda had used the same trick years ago, washing my hair with dish soap to make it brittle and fall out. She'd told Dad it was stress from school. I adjusted her meal plan that afternoon, reducing portions further. When she protested, I pulled out my tablet and showed her the photos. See this thinning pattern? Classic sign of non-compliance. You must be sneaking food somewhere. Her protest fell on deaf ears. I'd learned from the master herself how to twist evidence into weapons. Eleanor's daughter visited that weekend. Sweet little Emma, only 8 years old, watched her grandmother pick at her lunch with concerned eyes. Grandma, why aren't you eating more? Emma asked innocently. Before Linda could answer, I interjected smoothly. Grandma has to eat special portions to stay healthy. We're helping her get better. Emma nodded solemnly. My friend's mom says portion control is important. Are you helping Grandma with portion control? The words hit Linda like a physical blow. I watched her shoulders slump as Emma parroted my exact phrasing throughout the visit. That evening, I discovered Linda's old diet journals hidden in the attic. Years of meticulous records detailing every morsel I'd eaten, every pound I'd lost, every infraction carefully documented. I spread them across my bed, highlighting specific entries with fluorescent markers. The patterns were all there. The gradual reduction techniques, the psychological manipulation, the medical terminology she'd used to justify the abuse. I photographed each page, building my playbook for the weeks ahead. Linda found me studying them the next morning. Her face went pale as she recognized her own handwriting. Those are private, she said weakly. We're private, I corrected, not looking up. Now they're educational materials. You were quite thorough in your methods. I watched realization dawn in her eyes. Every technique she'd perfected on me was now being refined and returned with interest. The recording device I'd hidden in the kitchen captured our next confrontation perfectly. Linda, desperate and hungry, begged for more food. My response echoed her words from decades past. Hunger is just your body healing itself, I said calmly. You should be grateful I care enough to help you. I played the recording during her next meal, watching her flinch at her own phrases thrown back at her. The psychological warfare was escalating exactly as planned. Dad called during dinner, right on schedule. Linda's blood sugar was at its lowest, making coherent conversation difficult. She stumbled over her words, seeming confused and disoriented. She's having one of her episodes, I explained to Dad, my voice full of concern. The doctor warned this might happen with her blood sugar fluctuations. After the call, I found Linda rummaging through my room. She'd discovered my revenge journal, but I'd anticipated this. Every entry was written in medical terminology, documenting her treatment in language that sounded legitimate to untrained eyes. Fascinating case study, I said from the doorway. A diabetic patient with severe food addiction and compliance issues. The psychological components are particularly interesting. She threw the journal at me, tears streaming down her face. You're documenting torture. I'm documenting medical intervention, I corrected, picking up the journal. Every entry follows standard clinical notation. Would you like me to explain the terminology? Eleanor arrived unexpectedly the next day, concerned about her mother's weight loss. I was ready with my evidence. Look at these emails, I said, pulling up Linda's old messages on my laptop. Years ago, she wrote about my greed and manipulation around food. Classic projection from someone with their own food issues. Eleanor read through them, her expression shifting from concern to disappointment. The emails painted a picture of a woman obsessed with controlling food, using terms like portion control and tough love repeatedly. I had no idea she was so fixated on food back then, Eleanor murmured. The patterns were always there, I said gently. We just didn't recognize them. What Eleanor didn't know was that I'd found something else in those old files. Bank statements showing Linda had been skimming the lunch money Dad gave her for me, funneling it into Eleanor's extracurricular activities. The theft was small but systematic, documented across years. I presented this evidence carefully, letting Eleanor draw her own conclusions. She stole your lunch money? Eleanor's voice was hollow. While you went hungry, she made choices, I said simply. Now we need to make sure she gets the help she needs. Linda's attempt to order pizza that evening was intercepted by our vigilant neighbor, Mrs. Chen. I'd spoken with her earlier about Linda's food addiction, asking her to watch for delivery vehicles. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Chen told the delivery driver. She's not supposed to order food. She has a medical condition. Linda watched from the window as the pizza disappeared down the street. I stood behind her, close enough that she could feel my presence. Mrs. Chen is very supportive of your recovery, I said. The whole neighborhood wants to help. The isolation was systematic and complete. Every potential ally had been given just enough information to make them unwitting accomplices in Linda's restriction. Dr. Patterson moved up Linda's appointment after I reported concerning symptoms. In his office, Linda tried desperately to speak directly to him. The diet is too restrictive, she began. I'm constantly hungry and she's been showing increased confusion, I interrupted smoothly. Yesterday she insisted she hadn't eaten dinner when I'd fed her 3 hours earlier. I'm worried about cognitive decline. The doctor's attention shifted to me, the medical professional with credentials and detailed documentation. Linda's protests were reframed as symptoms of a larger problem. We may need to consider more intensive monitoring, he mused, making notes. Linda's bridge club called that week, wondering why she'd missed another meeting. I explained she'd been irritable and demanding lately, using the exact words Linda had used to describe me to her friends when I was 12. It's the blood sugar fluctuations, I said sympathetically. She's not herself right now. The invitations stopped coming after that. Another social connection severed, another support system dismantled. The daily weigh-ins became a ritual of humiliation. I pinched her skin to check for dehydration, targeting the same spots where she'd grabbed me years ago. The bruises that bloomed were carefully documented as areas of concern. Your skin elasticity is poor, I noted, pinching harder than necessary. Are you drinking enough water? She nodded quickly, trying to pull away from my grip, but I held on, just as she had held on to me all those years ago. One morning, I found her staring at herself in the bathroom mirror, counting her ribs. The sight triggered a memory so vivid I had to grip the doorframe to stay steady. Me, at 13, doing the exact same thing while Linda watched from this very doorway. Vanity is unbecoming, I said, echoing her words from that day. You should focus on health, not appearance. The irony was sharp enough to cut, but I pushed forward, driven by something darker than simple revenge. I offered her a deal that afternoon. Admit what you did was abuse, I said simply. Acknowledge that starving a child is torture, not parenting. Do that, and I'll stop. Linda's jaw set stubbornly. I was teaching you discipline, self-control. It was for your own good. Then this is for yours, I replied, reducing her dinner portion by another 50 calories. The medical documentation I presented to Dr. Patterson the following week was masterful in its deception. By misrepresenting Linda's activity level and metabolic needs, I got approval to reduce her daily intake to 900 calories. She's essentially sedentary, I explained, showing fabricated activity logs. And with her slowed metabolism, she needs far fewer calories than we initially calculated. He signed off on the new plan without questioning my expertise. After all, I was the nutritionist. I was the one with her best interests at heart. Linda discovered my college medical records while I was preparing her lunch. The papers trembled in her hands as she read about my hospitalization for refeeding syndrome, about how I'd nearly died from the years of starvation she'd inflicted. You almost died, she whispered, looking up at me with something like horror. I did die, I corrected, plating her meager portion. The girl you raised died in that hospital bed. I'm what grew back. The revelation seemed to break something in her, but not enough to admit what she'd done was wrong. Never enough for that. I revealed another piece of my planning that evening. Dad's travel schedule is quite demanding, I mentioned casually. Good thing his company values his dedication to that Singapore project, and the upcoming Hong Kong expansion, and the quarterly reviews in London. Understanding dawned in her eyes. You've been ensuring he stays busy? Of course. A stressed spouse at home would only distract him from important work. Every slip in her diet had been carefully orchestrated. I'd leave tempting foods within reach, then document her non-compliance when she inevitably gave in to hunger. The candy bar I'd planted in her purse, the crackers I'd hidden in her nightstand, all discovered and photographed as evidence of her addiction. You set me up, Linda accused after I'd found the planted evidence. You set yourself up, I replied. I simply documented your choices. Eleanor was forced to choose between believing her mother or the mounting medical evidence. When she sided with me, Linda's devastation was complete. Why would she lie about your health? Eleanor asked her mother. She's trying to help you. Linda's desperate call to Eleanor that night shattered their relationship further. Hungry and frustrated, Linda lashed out, accusing Eleanor of taking my side without understanding the situation. You've always been controlling about food, Eleanor shot back. Even when we were kids, you were obsessed with portions and diets. Maybe this is karma. The accusation was perfectly crafted, planted weeks ago through careful conversation and and selective evidence. Eleanor didn't realize she was parroting my narrative. I began implementing Linda's own starvation techniques with clinical precision. Black coffee for breakfast, calling it cleansing. Bone broth for lunch, labeled as healing. The same phrases she'd used on me, returned with medical authority. Your body doesn't need more, I explained when she begged for solid food. Hunger is just healing in disguise. The community garage sale provided an unexpected opportunity. Linda, desperate and dizzy with hunger, tried to buy food from a neighbor's bake sale table. Several people witnessed her fumbling with money, seeming confused and agitated. Please, she begged Mrs. Patterson, just one cookie. I have money. I arrived just in time to smooth things over, explaining to the gathered crowd about her condition and food addiction. I quoted Linda's own words about greed and lack of control, watching her face crumble with each phrase. We need to be supportive but firm, I told the sympathetic neighbors. Enabling her addiction won't help her heal. The documentation of her food hoarding behavior grew more damning with each staged incident. Photos of her trying to hide food, videos of her confused behavior when hungry, medical charts showing her non-compliance, all painted a picture of a woman spiraling out of control. Catherine started questioning the diet after seeing Linda's dramatic weight loss, but my medical credentials and calm professionalism convinced her to maintain the strict protocol. I know it seems extreme, I told Catherine, but diabetes is a serious condition. Would you rather see her lose a few pounds or lose her feet? The false dichotomy worked perfectly. Catherine backed off, promising to support the treatment plan. Linda was fighting a war on two fronts now, trying to convince family members while battling actual starvation. But I'd studied her playbook for years. I anticipated every move, countered every argument with her own tactics refined and weaponized. Her energy depletion made it impossible to maintain consistent stories. The confusion from low blood sugar led to contradictions that I carefully documented and shared with concerned family members. She told me she hadn't eaten all day, Eleanor reported after a phone call. But you fed her lunch, right? 3 hours before she called you, I confirmed, showing the meal log. This is what I mean about the confusion. It's heartbreaking to watch. The public confrontation at the grocery store was particularly effective. Linda had managed to walk there despite her weakness, desperate to buy food. I found her in the bread aisle, clutching a loaf like a lifeline. Linda, I said calmly, aware of the other shoppers watching, you know you can't have that. Let's get you home. I need food, she cried out, drawing more attention. She's starving me. I maintained my composure, speaking in the reasonable tone I'd perfected. I know you're frustrated with your medical diet, but making scenes won't change your treatment plan. The store manager approached, concerned. I explained about her diabetes and food addiction, how she sometimes became agitated when restricted from certain foods. The other shoppers looked at Linda with pity as I gently but firmly removed the bread from her hands. I'm her nutritionist and caregiver, I explained. She's going through a difficult adjustment period. Linda's attempts to tell her truth were dismissed as the ravings of a woman in denial about her health conditions. My careful groundwork had ensured that every potential ally saw her through the lens I'd created. Dad considered early retirement to help with Linda's care, but I convinced him otherwise. She needs consistency, I explained during our weekly call. Changing her routine now could derail all our progress. Besides, the company needs you. Linda would feel terrible if you sacrificed your career for her. I'd already interviewed and rejected several potential replacement caregivers, finding fault with each one. Too permissive, not medically trained, unable to maintain strict protocols. The rejection letters were carefully filed, evidence of my diligence in seeking help that would never materialize. The inevitable happened on a Thursday morning. Linda collapsed in the kitchen, her body finally unable to sustain itself on the meager calories I provided. I called 911 with practiced calm, explaining her medical history and recent non-compliance with her diet. At the hospital, I presented my detailed documentation to the medical team, charts showing her prescribed diet, logs of her cheating, notes about her confusion and food-seeking behaviors. The picture I painted was of a diabetic woman who couldn't stop eating despite medical advice. She must be getting food somewhere, I said, my voice full of concern. I've been so careful with her portions, but look at these blood sugar spikes. The spikes were real, caused by the small amounts of sugar I'd been adding to her permitted foods, just enough to destabilize her levels and support my narrative. The hospital nutritionist reviewed my meal plans with a frown. This seems quite restrictive for someone her age and activity level. I was ready with my response. I thought so too, initially, but look at her food diary. I produced the falsified document showing Linda consuming far more than her prescribed amounts. She must be hiding food and lying about it. Classic addiction behavior. Linda tried to protest from her hospital bed, but her words were dismissed as denial. The pattern I'd established held firm. The medical professional with credentials versus the non-compliant patient. As I watched them hook her up to IV nutrition, I felt the same hollow satisfaction I'd experienced watching her count green beans. This wasn't healing. It wasn't even revenge anymore. It was something darker, a perfect mirror of the torture she'd inflicted, reflected back with medical precision and psychological expertise. The dance would continue. Tomorrow, I'd adjust her meal plan again, find new ways to isolate her, document more concerning behaviors. I'd learned from the best, after all. Linda had taught me that love could be twisted into control, that care could become cruelty. The student had surpassed the teacher, and we were both trapped in the lesson. The IT department's audit notification arrived 3 days after Linda's hospitalization. I stared at the email on my phone, my stomach dropping as I read about unusual access patterns in the medical record system. They'd traced alterations back to Linda's login credentials. I immediately drove to the hospital, finding Linda awake but weak in her bed. She watched me enter with hollow eyes. They're checking the system, I said quietly, closing the door behind me. You need to tell them you made those changes yourself. She turned her face away. Why would I help you? Because if you don't, they'll dig deeper. I moved closer to her bed, and they'll find everything, including what I've been adding to your food. The truth hung between us like a blade. For months before becoming her caregiver, I'd been visiting regularly, helping with meals. Each time, I'd added carefully measured amounts of sugar to her foods, destabilizing her diabetes just enough to make her seem non-compliant. Linda's eyes widened with understanding. You sabotaged my health before you even moved in. I learned from the best, I said simply. Now, are you going to cooperate? Dad arrived at the hospital that afternoon, having cut his Singapore trip short. He looked exhausted, confused, carrying a folder I recognized immediately, my old medical records from college. I found these in Linda's closet, he said, his voice strained. Why were they hidden there? I watched Linda's face as Dad flipped through the pages, reading about my hospitalization for refeeding syndrome, the years of documented starvation, the permanent damage to my growth and development. She almost died, Dad said, looking between us. Our daughter almost died from malnutrition. In our house. house, under our roof. Linda's silence spoke volumes. Dad's hands shook as he continued reading the clinical descriptions of my condition at age 18. The stunted growth, the absent menstruation, the bone density of someone decades older. Did you do this? He asked Linda directly. Did you starve my daughter? Before she could answer, I spoke up. Dad, Linda's sick. She needs help, not accusations. He turned to me, and I saw something shift in his expression. Did you do to her what she did to you? The question hung in the air. I responded with Linda's own words, the ones she'd used so many times when I was young. Sometimes tough love is necessary. Sometimes people need to learn through experience. Eleanor and Catherine arrived together, having coordinated after comparing notes about Linda's care. They discovered discrepancies in my reports, old photos that contradicted my timeline of Linda's weight gain. We need to have a family meeting, Eleanor announced. All of us. Now, the meeting was scheduled for the next morning at our childhood home. I spent the night preparing, knowing this was the culmination of everything I'd orchestrated. The dining room table, where I'd watched others eat while my stomach cramped with hunger, would be our battleground. I arrived early, setting out refreshments for everyone, fresh fruit, pastries, coffee. I arranged Linda's chair at the head of the table but placed nothing in front of it. Dad helped Linda from the car, her weakness evident in every step. Eleanor and Catherine followed, their faces grim. Even Emma was there, clutching Eleanor's hand. We sat in the same positions we'd held for years of family dinners. The empty space in front of Linda seemed to grow larger as everyone else reached for food and drinks. Let's start with the facts, Eleanor said, pulling out a folder. Mom's medical records show she was at a healthy weight 6 months ago. These diet restrictions have no medical basis. I remained calm, presenting my documentation. Charts, logs, photos, all the evidence I'd carefully crafted over months. Linda has a history of food obsession. Look at these journals from when I was young. I spread Linda's old diet journals across the table, the ones documenting my childhood starvation in meticulous detail. Eleanor read them with growing horror. My God, she whispered. Mom, you recorded every bite she took. You counted her calories when she was 9 years old. I was trying to help her, Linda said weakly. She needed structure. Structure? I pulled out more evidence. Here are the bank records. You stole my lunch money for years, took food meant for a hungry child and spent it on Eleanor's dance classes. Eleanor's face went pale. That's where my recital money came from? The room erupted in accusations and denials. In the chaos, Emma suddenly started gasping, her face flushing red. An allergic reaction. She'd eaten something with hidden peanuts. Where's her EpiPen? Eleanor screamed, frantically searching her purse. Upstairs bathroom, I said calmly. Medicine cabinet, top shelf. Eleanor ran while I called 911. Linda struggled to her feet, trying to help despite her weakness. For a moment, our eyes met over Emma's wheezing form, and I saw my stepmother clearly. Not the monster of my memories, but a frightened woman watching her granddaughter struggle to breathe. The ambulance arrived within minutes. As the paramedics worked on Emma, they noticed Linda's condition. Her blood work, drawn in the emergency room, revealed dangerous malnutrition levels that matched exactly what mine had been at age 18. These numbers, the doctor told Dad privately, though I overheard from the hallway, they're precisely calibrated. Someone with medical knowledge did this deliberately. Dad found me in the hospital cafeteria, staring at a full tray of food I couldn't bring myself to eat. He sat across from me, looking older than I'd ever seen him. Every family member in that room, he said slowly, enabled either the original abuse or your revenge. Eleanor took the stolen lunch money. Catherine never questioned why you were so thin. I worked 70 hours a week and believed whatever Linda told me. He paused, choosing his words carefully. And now, you've become her. I became what she made me. I corrected. Number. His voice was firm. You became what you chose to become. Just like she chose to hurt a child, you chose to hurt a sick woman. The legal consultations that followed revealed what I already knew. No criminal charges would stick. I'd operated within medical guidelines, documented everything properly. Linda's childhood abuse had passed the statute of limitations decades ago. We were both untouchable and both destroyed. Dad made his decision that night. He would divorce Linda and cut contact with me. I can't choose between the wife who abused my daughter and the daughter who became an abuser, he said. So I choose neither. Eleanor followed suit, banning both Linda and me from contact with Emma. I won't let my daughter grow up in this poison, she said simply. Linda, too weak to live alone and legally barred from my care after the family's complaints to the medical board, was placed in a nursing home. I was banned from the premises but found ways to send care packages through unwitting volunteers. Sugar-free candies that weren't quite what they seemed, protein bars with carefully modified labels. Catherine discovered my scheme within weeks and had me formally restricted from any contact. But the damage was done. Linda knew I was still out there, still watching, still finding ways to control her food. I returned to my nutrition practice, my reputation intact despite the family drama. My colleagues saw me as a dedicated professional who'd tried to help a difficult family member. My expertise in treating eating disorders grew, informed by intimate knowledge of both sides of starvation. The irony wasn't lost on me. I saved other victims using skills honed through becoming a perpetrator. Each successful patient was both redemption and reminder of what I'd become. 5 years passed. Dad remarried, a widow with a teenage daughter. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned the girl was naturally thin, a picky eater. I watched from afar as the patterns threatened to repeat, as Dad's new wife fretted over portions and calories. I thought about warning them, thought about intervening, but I did nothing, because Linda had taught me well. Some cycles can't be broken, only perpetuated. Some dances, once learned, can never be forgotten. Linda still lives in the nursing home, her body sustained by carefully measured meals she has no control over. I still practice nutrition, teaching others about the healing power of food while carrying the weight of weaponizing it. We created perfect justice and perfect injustice simultaneously. She finally understands the hell she created, feeling every moment of helplessness she once inflicted. I saved future victims using knowledge gained from becoming what I despised most. Neither of us can escape what we've made of each other. The student and teacher, forever locked in our dance of mutual destruction, each bearing the scars we carved into the other's soul. The meals continue. The counting never stops. And somewhere, in a house I'll never enter, a thin teenage girl pushes food around her plate while her stepmother watches with calculating eyes. The dance goes on.